Happy August, folks, and welcome back to WrestleRant. I am Graham G.S. Matthews, and today we're breaking down the 2001 installment of WWE SummerSlam as seen on the WWE Network. Now, as I said in my last review for SummerSlam, the 2000 show, that was probably my favorite edition of SummerSlam to date, other than, the more current ones, but the ones I've watched the last couple of weeks since 1988 to 2000 at that point. And this one, if it does not beat it out, it certainly comes close. This was also a great show. And as I talked about in my last review, it's weird because the WrestleMania 17 was phenomenal, but I didn't enjoy a lot of the Attitude Era pay-per-views, WrestleMania-wise. 13, 14, 15, and 16, I just didn't enjoy. But the SummerSlams I've noticed have been a lot better. And granted, this one, the Attitude Era technically ended with the WrestleMania 17. This took place after the fact, but it was still a great year, other than the Invasion stuff, which I'll get to in a second. But this was still a great pay-per-view, and I'm surprised because, as I mentioned, the Invasion stuff, I wasn't a huge fan of. It was not the greatest angle that WWE ever did. It's, infamously known as the one angle they tremendously botched beyond belief, and they just didn't handle their talent correctly, and they didn't have enough big names for it to mean anything. This pay-per-view, no offense to Booker T, was headlined by The Rock and Booker T. How much more meaningful would that match have been for the WCW Championship if Booker T was instead a Sting, a Hogan, a Nash, a Hall even? All those guys didn't come in until later. A Goldberg, a Scott Steiner even. Booker T, while he was good, it was the biggest guy they had to offer on the WCW side, really? Which is really why it came as no surprise that Stone Cold Steve Austin, who was a heel at the time anyway, so it wasn't a huge shocker, joined the Alliance side by that summer. But anyway, though, for a pay-per-view that took place during the Alliance era in the latter half of 2001, this was a really good show. Every single match in the show was WWF versus WCW, but the in-ring action was so good that I just had to excuse the fact that the Alliance angle, while it was not done well at all on these matches, were tremendous. Kicking off the show for the Intercontinental Championship, Edge contending for the gold against Lance Storm. I think I watched this match. If it wasn't this match, it was the house show match these two had. I forgot what it was, but I think it was on Edge's DVD, not the most recent one. The one that was released back in 2008, I think. The Decade of Decadence, or however you say it, whatever that DVD was. I got that DVD not too long ago, and I believe a match with Edge and Lance Storm was on it. If it wasn't this match, it was one of their other encounters. This was a good opener. Edge was not a solidified single star at this period in time. I believe this was after the King of the Ring, so he had already become the 2001 King of the Ring winner, so he was already kind of often running to the races as a single star, but he was not established as much as a lot of the as much as you would think he would be at this point in time. He was still kind of rising in the ranks. So the opening slot was perfect for him. He had a great showing here against Lance Storm, who was a great wrestler in his own right. So these two, unsurprisingly, putting forth a very good effort. And in the end, Edge, despite some interference from Christian, he would play off the fact that, I was coming to help you. He almost accidentally cost him the title. He accidentally hit Edge. But in the end, though, Edge would still win the Intercontinental Championship, and a big win for WWF, bringing that title back to the WWF side of things. So afterwards, backstage, Edge was celebrating his IC title win with all the rest of the WWF members, and Christian was saying, "Oh, congrats!" But now, he went to Commissioner Regal saying, "Now I have the European Championship match tomorrow night on Raw. How big is that?" And he called like his nanny or something like that, and he was like, "Nanny, you heard that I got a title shot, right? Oh, well, you want to talk to Edge? Okay." And then she talks to Edge, and he hands the phone back to Christian once he's done with her, and he goes, "Hey, Nanny, hello?" And it was hilarious. But in those two, the chemistry Edge and Christian had was off the charts. You don't mean to tell you that. It was fantastic. This was kind of planting the seeds for their future feud over that championship in the latter half, in the final few months of 2001. After that, we had a six-man tag team match. Representing the Alliance, it was the Dudley Boys and Test taking on the WWF's the APA in Spike Dudley. A good match. I've always enjoyed the Dudley Boys and all their matches that they've had. I've always had especially since the Rumble 6 months ago, I've always loved, not always, but like I said, since the Rumble 6 months ago, I've loved the Dudley Boys theme song. It's a great theme. This was a fun little match. It didn't really mean too much. There was no titles on the line. It's weird. It was the only match on the show, other than Jericho and Rhyno, of the 8 matches on this show. Only 2 of them were non-title. A lot of the matches were either merging 2 titles or whatever, but this one was just a standard 6-man tag team match. So it didn't really have much to offer. You had the Spike Dudley versus Dudley Boys dynamic there, but that was about it. In the end, it was the Dudley Boys and Test going over, so a decent match, nothing too great, but fine for what it was. After that, we had X-Pac versus Tajiri in a title unification match of the WCW Cruiserweight Championship, which was being held by X-Pac at that time, and the Light Heavyweight Championship, which is being held by Tajiri. So this was the only match in the show that was a WWF versus WWF match. I don't know why that would be booked. I think X-Pac was still a heel at this time, but because people cheered Tajiri over X-Pac in this match, I believe, if I recall correctly. I don't remember the exact details about it, but it was a really fun match. What it was, a great style Cruiserweight Championship match. The final time we would see the Light Heavyweight title in WWE, as the WCW Cruiserweight title would be rechristened into the WWF Cruiserweight Championship, made exclusive to SmackDown years later. But a really good match, so the commentators kind of stressed the fact that there really wasn't a winner in this thing. I mean, there was kind of a win-win, there was kind of a lose-lose. I mean, they were fighting for the same championship, and they were both on the same side, so it's kind of the two members fighting with each other, so it didn't really matter. But, still, that logic gap aside, this was still a really fun match, and in the end, it was X-Pac winning the match with the Facebuster to unify the Cruiserweight and Light Heavyweight titles. After that, we had Chris Jericho taking on Rhyno in a singles match with Stephanie McMahon in Rhyno's corner. And although there weren't any championships on the line in this contest, what I liked about it was that it had a storyline to it. Stephanie wanted, she set out Rhyno as kind of like her soldier, so to speak, for the Alliance to destroy Jericho, who was bad-mouthing Stephanie back and, constantly throughout 2000 and 2001, the ongoing feud that those two had, very well documented. And they also told the story before the match in a backstage segment with Rhyno and Stephanie that Rhyno had never been beaten by Jericho. Jericho had never been able to pick up a singles win over Rhyno, whether it be in WWF or ECW or wherever. So he had that going for him, and it was kind of obvious that Jericho would go over here, but they still put forth a really good match. My favorite spot of the bout would probably have to be, undoubtedly, when Jericho jumped off the top rope to the outside, and a waiting Rhyno took out Jericho with a gore in midair. I mean, it wasn't as gory, no pun intended, I guess, as you would expect, but it was still a pretty brutal sight and a brutal gore from Rhyno, who in my opinion executes one of the best spears in the business, next to Goldberg. He always had a mean spear, and he still does today down in NXT. But a really good match. In the end, Jericho would force Rhyno to submit, pick up the victory, and they got replays of Stephanie McMahon freaking out at ringside, so that was pretty great. So a fun match, better than expected. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to be terrible or anything like that, but for a match that didn't really have anything on the line, other than it just being a personal vendetta kind of feud, it was still a well-wrestled match and a good win for Chris Jericho. So after that, we had a ladder match of the Hardcore Championship between the two ladder specialists, Rob Van Dam and Jeff Hardy, the two perfect competitors that you could put in that contest, and these guys would have a great series of matches in the years to come, in 01 and 02 as well. I believe it was in 02. Wasn't it a ladder match? They had a ladder match to unify, I think, coincidentally enough, the Hardcore and Intercontinental Championships. And I think at that time, Jeff Hardy was the Hardcore Champion, which he was in this match as well. A really fun match. There was one botch where I think Jeff was hanging from the title and RVD was going to jump off the top rope, and you know how he jumps off, like does a springboard kick and stuff like that. I don't know exactly what it's called. A mule kick, I think is the technical term for it. He was going to do one of those off the top rope, and he missed big time. It didn't even look like he connected at all, and the commentators acknowledged that. And Jeff Hardy, RVD was kind of laying in wait on the ground, and there was really nothing that Jeff could do. It's not like RVD was going to get back up there and do it again, because Jeff was kind of dangling there, so he just kind of dropped, and it was kind of an ugly fall. So, but that one botch aside, it was still a good match, though, a really fun match, and as I said, perfectly fitting of the two styles of both competitors. And in the end, it was RVD picking up the win, ascending the ladder, and winning the Hardcore title, which was, you know, perfect with his hardcore ways, of his hardcore style of wrestling, and perfect for what RVD was known for. Very fitting for a very fitting title victory for the one-of-a-kind competitor. But even the commentators acknowledged that even though RVD was a part of the Alliance, he was still one of the most popular guys in the company that period in time, when everyone else that part of the Alliance was booed. RVD, despite being a part of the Alliance, was heavily cheered by the audience. I mean, that kind of worked in his favor throughout this contest. And in a great contest, that it was very well wrestled, or kind of a spot fest for the most part. But that one botch aside, it was a very enjoyable contest, and RVD would go on to accomplish big things in WWE. I'm just surprised it took them as long as it did to put the world title on him. I know his mic skills weren't amazing, but he likely, in my opinion, would have been world champion at some point in 2002. It looked like they were grooming him for a run with that championship, had it not been for, the Triple H politics over on Raw and whatever, and just kind of hogging the spotlight for the 3 years from 02 to 05 in the Raw brand. But still, great match, though, from RVD and Jeff Hardy in this contest. After that, we had a steel cage match for the WCW and WWF Tag Team titles to merge the two championships between the Brothers of Destruction, Undertaker and Kane, of course, taking on Diamond Dallas Page and Chris Kanyon. So, I don't know if it was on WrestleRant or where it was, where I was kind of questioning the whole Undertaker DDP stuff. It might have been, maybe it was on Twitter. I don't remember where I was talking about it. I know I was talking about it to somebody. But the whole storyline where they brought in DDP being the stalker of Undertaker's wife Sarah at that period in time was so stupid. And so many people, it was kind of a dream match at that period in time, was to do The Rock versus DDP, the People's Champion in WWF versus the People's Champion in WWE. And it's not like it couldn't have been done. You had Booker T in the main event of all people, and he wasn't feuding with a lesser name, DDP that is. He was feuding with The Undertaker. So it really honestly could have been done if they brought back Rock in time to do that feud at SummerSlam. I honestly would have probably seen that match over what we ended up getting. That wasn't a bad match, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Rock versus Booker T for the WCW title. But I think it would have benefited if you had The Rock versus DDP, the People's Champion versus the People's Champion main event at SummerSlam. Would have been a blockbuster, but it is what it is. I thought the Stalker shit was just terrible. I didn't enjoy, I didn't follow the feud, obviously. I was far from being a fan at that point. It wasn't until 2008 that I got into the product. But it just wasn't fitting of DDP at all. It wasn't in line with this character. It was really random, leading to this match on pay-per-view. I don't know how Chris Kanyon got involved in this either. I missed something there. And Kane, teaming up with his brother again to kind of take out a common enemy in DDP made sense. But the main focus in this match should have been on the tag team titles being unified. It wasn't. It was more so on the brooding rivalry between DDP and Undertaker. And at one point, after Chris Kanyon escaped the cage, it was Brothers of Destruction versus DDP. And after that, DDP was on the verge of escaping. Undertaker said, "I'll let you go. Just never come back again." And he let him go for a brief second. Kane kind of went up to him and said, "What the hell are you doing? We got to beat these guys. We got to win the titles. It makes no sense." And if it did end that way, it would have made no sense, because DDP would have come back and just been a thorn in his ass anyway. So it wouldn't have made any sense to have him win like that. So anyway, Undertaker pulls him off the top of the cage, hits him with a vicious chokeslam. They double team him. Undertaker hits him with a last ride to pick up the win and to unify the tag team titles. So the match was kind of a clusterfuck. A lot of brawling. It was more about the quote-unquote story being told than it was about the match itself. The crowd couldn't really get into it up until... they came alive when Undertaker gave DDP his comeuppance, but everything else before that was just kind of a mess, for lack of a better term, kind of fitting of the feud that they were having between Taker and DDP at that time. But still, I like the ending, though, with Undertaker finally getting one over DDP, picking up the win, and unifying the tag team titles. So, unifying the tag team championship. My voice cracked there for a second. But a crowd-pleasing finish to that matchup. So after that, we get to the top two main events. First one being for the WWF Championship. Kurt Angle contending for the gold against Stone Cold Steve Austin, who is representing the Alliance, and Kurt Angle obviously representing the WWF. So I really, really like this matchup, and I was surprised. Stone Cold's heel turn, both the heel turn and the heel run that he had in 2001 don't get a good rap. And deservedly so. It wasn't really well booked. He did not need to turn heel at that period in time, much less in his home state of Texas at WrestleMania 17. I don't know who thought that one out. And he was more of a full-fledged heel than he was a tweener. He was kind of a tweener in some respects, which he should have been the anti-hero, been all along. And kind of, as Stone Cold was pitched on his podcast before, turning on Rock at WrestleMania 17, then turning on Vince McMahon as well instead of shaking his hand, which went against what his character had done for years, but I digress. Still, he held that championship, and they did a really nice job of building him up as an unstoppable champion, of defending that title successfully in every single match he was a part of. At Backlash, Judgment Day, King of the Ring, and on this pay-per-view too. So he had held that championship consecutively. He didn't drop it and then won it back, which they would do with a lot of these championships throughout the Attitude Era, which I was not in agreement with, but that was just kind of the part of the times. But still, Steve Austin would hold that championship from WrestleMania to this show, where Kurt Angle would step up and contend for the title. In the match early on, it wasn't great. Stone Cold would hit 2 stunners on Kurt Angle in like the first 5 minutes, and that was kind of random. He would hit another Stone Cold stunner at the end. A third one he would kick out as well. And it kind of goes back to the recent argument that people have been having, the recent debate of the John Cena and Kevin Owens matches that have been going on since Elimination Chamber and the constantly exchanging of the finishers. I'm not a fan of it either. I mean, it's nice when it's done sparingly and it's done every once in a while, not with every single match. Thankfully, this was the only match on the show that used that formula, so it really wasn't, it wasn't a tired formula by the time this match came on, and the main event didn't do it either, I believe. But still, I thought it was very well done, and I mean, for that, I wasn't a huge fan of 3 Stone Cold Stunners being hit and Angle still kicking out. But other than that, though, it felt like a personal rivalry. Steve Austin, who had turned his back on the WWF and the fans months earlier, with Kurt Angle being the conquering hero for the WWF, and people were red hot for him. They were white hot for Kurt Angle that year as the standard bearer, the saving grace of the WWF in going after that championship. They did a lot of brawling. They were in the crowd for a while, just beating the shit out of each other. Kurt Angle had a crimson mask of blood on his face. It was nuts, and they would really go all out, delivering a lot of suspenseful near falls. There were many points where I thought, I mean, going into this, I did not know the victor. I remember reading about it, a while ago, of course, but it had been so long since I read up on this pay-per-view that I didn't know the results of a lot of these matches, which kind of helped add to my enjoyment of the pay-per-view, of the event. But still, there were many points during the contest, especially down the stretch, where I thought Kurt Angle was coming out of this match victorious. He was so close on many points, at various points in this match, to winning that title. I thought he was going to win, which was a true testament to the work of both men and the effort they put into this contest. I thought it was tremendous. But in the end, though, I wasn't really that big of a fan of the finish, and I thought if there was any time to put the title on Angle, it would have been here. Granted, they would have him win the championship a month later at Unforgiven in his hometown of Pittsburgh, so it wasn't that, it wasn't like a missed cause. Maybe people will say, oh, they waited too long to put the belt on Angle. I got to watch that pay-per-view back. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure the title win for Kurt Angle on that show is monstrous, considering it was in his hometown. Maybe that's what they were holding out for. But still, in the end, though, Kurt Angle would force Steve Austin to tap out, or he would pin him. I think he had him knocked out. And after, right before that, Steve Austin had Stone Cold stunned a referee. He had delivered a stunner to one of the referees. And in the meantime, Angle knocked out Stone Cold, got the 1-2-3 on him. A referee runs down, but instead of hitting the 1-2-3 count, it was an alliance referee, and he called for the bell. He disqualified Austin, and Angle would hurt Austin after the match, and he would also lock in the ankle lock on the referee as well. So Angle would win via disqualification, yet still the WWF champion, Stone Cold Steve Austin, like I said, protecting Angle, keeping the belt on Austin, and building to that rematch 1 month later at Unforgiven. And then finally, we get to the main event, The Rock versus Booker T for the WCW Championship. Now, The Rock had taken some time off after WrestleMania 17, and what not bothered me, but what I was wondering while watching this pay-per-view, maybe someone can shine some light on it in the comments or by tweeting me or on Facebook, whatever, why The Rock didn't go back after the WWF Championship upon his return. Because as you can recall, of course, he got cheated out of the title at WrestleMania 17. He got fucked out of the belt by Stone Cold and Vince McMahon. I believe he got his rematch the next night on Raw. I don't know if he would lose there or if it was no contest, but I remember he got attacked in a way. Of course, that was the birth of the two-man power trip with Triple H, who would later get injured. Unfortunately, he was not a part of the alliance at all, which was maybe to his benefit. But they would write off The Rock. They would write Rock off of TV to go film some movies for a while. I believe the Scorpion King, the Mummy. I think it was the Mummy Returns. Yeah, I believe he was filming the Mummy Returns first, and then he would go on in 2002 when he was gone for a while. He would go off to film the Scorpion Returns, the spinoff, of course. But still, The Rock came back, and there was a debate as to whether there was question as to what side he would join, whether he would join the WWF or the Alliance, and in the end he would side with the WWF. He would say that Vince McMahon didn't create me, that Vince McMahon didn't create The Rock, even The Rock didn't even create The Rock. The people created The Rock, and that's where I'm going to stay. The WWF is my home. Blah 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 blah. So The Rock stays babyface, and he sticks with his he sticks with his guns and stays with the WWF. So from there, he targets the WCW champion, Booker T, not the WWE champion, Stone Cold Steve Austin. I think it was an episode of SmackDown that kind of recapped it in the video package that preceded this match, where Booker T came out and The Rock just completely buried Booker T. I mean, I hate to use the word buried, but he completely no-sold who he was and stuff like that, which obviously did not boost the credibility of Booker T too much. I mean, one of the things about the Alliance, the whole invasion angle, was that WCW was made to look so inferior to WWF, and kind of make it look like they were like the little brother of the WWE, which of course Vince McMahon wanted to book that way because they were always inferior to them and they won the war, blah, 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 blah. And it didn't really do any favors for the invasion angle itself. But yeah, during that 1 segment, Rock would get challenged to a match at SummerSlam by Booker T for that WCW title, setting the stage for this contest. I still say the previous match between Angle and Austin was better. That had so much energy in it. The crowd was still electric for this match. They were still into it. There's a lot of interference from Shane McMahon, the leader, of course, of the Alliance, along with Paul Heyman and Stephanie at that period in time. But, interference aside of that, I still thought it was a good match. It was still very well wrestled, a very solid, energetic contest that the people were into. They weren't dead for it whatsoever. I probably would have gone with Angle and Austin as the main event, but it was what it was, and they got the more time anyway. They got about 20 minutes, and rightfully so. This match only went about 15 minutes, and they had to kind of cut it short. But Booker T, there was kind of a debate, too, during the match when Booker T would hit the quote-unquote rock bottom or the bookend. The bookend. And the commentators would say, that's not the bookend, or at least JR anyway, he would say, he would use the rock bottom, and Paul Heyman would say, no, that's the bookend. There's a difference there, and that was kind of funny. But in the end, though, he would go for the scissors kick only to be caught by The Rock into a rock bottom, pick up the win, and The Rock is your new WCW champion. So in one night, the titles kind of changed sides, or at least for the WCW side of things. They would go from having the WCW and WWF titles to only the WWF title after the WCW championship changed hands to the WWF. Tongue twister, that was kind of confusing even for me to say. But The Rock, your new WCW champion, you go off the air, kind of send the crowd home happy, and a great way of going off the show. So overall, I thought this was a really good show. As I mentioned before, my expectations were not too high. I didn't think it was going to be an awful show by any means. But considering the fact this was kind of when the invasion was... no part of the invasion was good. I mean, it was all kind of just one very badly booked angle. But still, I mean, you can always argue that this person shouldn't have won this match or whatever. And that was kind of the same thing with this show and with the people that turned from side to side, whatever. The alliance and the whole invasion angle was very poorly done. I think we can all agree on that. But this show alone, though, just consider this show and not the invasion show or any of the other following pay-per-views, or the pay-per-views that were to follow in the rest of 2001, I thought this was a really, really good to great show. The in-ring action was stellar. There was not a bad match on the show. The only bad match, if the worst match in the show is a Dudley Boy 6-man tag team match, then that's really saying something, because, I mean, all of the matches on the show were really, really good. Edge and Lance Storm put forth a really good effort. The 6-man tag team match was, like I said, fine for what it was. Nothing spectacular, but it was by no means terrible. The Cruiserweight title match was also really, really good. Jericho and Rhyno would have a really good match. After that, we had the Brothers of Destruction and DDP and Chris Kanyon, a decent match. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but it was what it was. RVD and Jeff Hardy, an awesome contest in a ladder match. Angle and Austin, my personal favorite match of the night. My match of the night, I thought that was terrific. And the main event was really good as well. So, yeah, I would recommend you go out of your way to watch this pay-per-view, although you may not be a fan of the invasion angle. As a standalone event, this was a really, really good show that I thoroughly enjoyed, much like the previous Attitude Era-themed SummerSlam shows, which were also very, very good. So make sure to check out this show on the WWE Network, as well as all my other reviews here on the channel of past SummerSlams from 88 to 2001. So here's the deal for tomorrow on Sunday. And going forward, we're going to be doing a review every Saturday, Sunday, and Tuesday, and hopefully I will not miss one. I've been so busy lately that I've been kind of missing some reviews here and there. But for the most part, though, we should be on track to getting every pay-per-view that I have not reviewed yet in time for SummerSlam this year on the 23rd, a little over 3 weeks away. So today, SummerSlam 01, as you just listened to. Tomorrow, SummerSlam 2003. So going forward, just remember, and I'll always continue to talk about this, when I talk about what's next here in the series, I'll continue to remind you of it. But I've already reviewed here on the channel SummerSlam 1988. I've already reviewed all the past ones anyway, but I reviewed a couple last year as a part of my WrestleRant series when I was only doing it once or twice a week as opposed to 2 to 3 times a week. I already reviewed SummerSlam 88, 2002, hence why I will not be up tomorrow. Just go back in the WrestleRant series. I'm sure it's up there somewhere. You just got to go back a while. It's way down there, like 100 editions ago. We've done a lot of WrestleRant editions in the last year. 88, 02, 08, 2011, and 2013. which tomorrow, as I said, means that my review will be up of SummerSlam 2003. So in the meantime, and in between time, folks, as always, you can find me on Twitter at WrestleRant. Like the Facebook page, give it a thumbs up at facebook.com/graham.gsm.matthews. Also, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. All support is greatly appreciated. And cheap plug for my website, nextairwrestling.net. Full written reviews of Raw, SmackDown, Impact Wrestling, NXT, Lucha Underground. Final episode on Wednesday, so check out my season finale review on the website this upcoming Wednesday. Main events and everything else, Ring of Honor, all the other shows that I review up there on the website. So, of course, guys, enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch you folks down the road.